Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Casual Connect. I am Jeff. This is Chris, and we're excited to spend the next hour with you talking about a phrase that Chris talked to me about a little while ago called Gamertainment. And I've spent 20 years in the video game industry as a reporter. I wrote for Entertainment Weekly for about 8 years about games, and during that phase, right after college, I heard a lot about the idea of Hollywood and entertainment coming together with games, and Chris has a really interesting perspective, I think, on why now is the time that it's finally going to happen after sort of many failed attempts over the years. So, Chris, first of all, thanks for joining us today. Great to have you with us.
Great to be here.
And first of all, congratulations. Big news about the TinyCo acquisition just a few weeks ago, joining the SGN family. You spent a lot of time with MySpace really sort of, inventing the new age social network. Now with SGN, you've spent many years kind of building a new gaming company. The TinyCo acquisition, how does that fit into your vision for what SGN is and what it's going to become?
So, first of all, we're seeing massive consolidation in the mobile gaming space. A lot of barriers to entry have been created. There's certainly room for some new entrants to come in. But it's pretty simple. In economic terms, we're seeing the industry grow by 20%, but also consolidate. So we're looking for a bigger piece of a growing pie. So that's super interesting, but it also gets us into a new genre of games, which is the builder genre or invest and express, where TinyCo is a leader using Hollywood-based IP. So super excited about that. I don't think we could have replicated that on our own.
So TinyCo, for those who may not be familiar with it, known, as you mentioned, for licensed IP, things like we see Family Guy up there. That's an interesting business and different than, SGN thus far. I know you've done a couple kind of movie-inspired things, but, a lot of your titles are homegrown IP. Why are you interested in sort of the licensed business? Because obviously it's a lower margin business because you have a licensor involved, but TinyCo has found success with that. What is the appeal? Does it sort of complement what you're doing now at SGN?
Yeah, so I don't think all licenses are alike. And I think the really interesting thing about TinyCo is they had a unique take on the types of IP that they would go after. So it's hardcore, rabid fans that want to watch a TV show or a movie and want to get immersed in the environment, but they don't get enough of it while they're watching the TV show or the movie. And they want to extend that immersion into playing a mobile game. So that got us really excited. And again, getting into a different genre got us really excited. And their revenues, we think they're going to do somewhere around $100 million in the next year. So it's a meaningful number, and we think it can get a lot bigger than that.
So what is your vision for SGN going forward with sort of TinyCo in the mix? Obviously, you guys have spent many years kind of building the company. You've found things that work, things that haven't worked.
Sorry, I just realized I didn't answer your question. Okay. I think your question was why IP, because you have to pay someone a certain licensing fee. And I think one of the things that we're all seeing is user acquisition is tough for all you guys, right? It's tough to get new players into your game because there's a million new games coming into the App Store. And IP helps you get more users more quickly, higher click rates or tap rates, whatever you want to call it, better install rates. So it's a little bit substitutional for advertising costs. Okay. So in some ways, it may be lower margin. In some ways, it may be higher margin. So it's very nice to have a mix of the two.
But I'm sure it's quite a competitive marketplace out there to sort of, dance with these IPs because lots of people are knocking. Or what does the market look like with, you're dealing with, big name brands. Obviously, we see, deals sort of every couple weeks. It feels like. What is that marketplace like right now to go and get these IPs?
Great question. So I think it's changed a lot. I think 3 years ago, 4 years ago, the IP owners were just looking for the biggest minimum guarantee possible. So the way these deals work, for those of you that don't know, you pay a big check up front, and then you recoup that money against a royalty fee which gets paid out as a percentage of the revenue or profit that you bring in as the gaming company. So I think in the past, the IP owners really only cared about the minimum guarantee, and they never expected that the money would get recouped. I think now it's very different in that they expect that the game that you're creating will be a meaningful contributor to their franchise's revenue goals. So this is a very long way of saying there's a short list for really great IPs that the IP owners will consider.
I imagine, because, there are only a few companies that, they're not betting on sort of the next 6 months. They're betting for, these deals are, I'm sure, 3-5 years? How long do they go?
Yeah, they have to go for quite a while, because it's like if we all look into the top grossing category, you can kind of look at the top 20, 30, 40 games. It's most of the same companies, and most of the games have been there. A lot of the games have been there for a very, very long time, from Clash of Clans to Candy Crush to our games, 2, 3, 4 years, and growing in revenue. So yeah, you have to have the time horizon, and you presumably would want rights to any kind of additional games using that IP. So
SGN, obviously, with Facebook, mobile now, I think a lot of people are wondering, where you see sort of the types of games you build going, regardless of whether they're licensed IP or your own. You mentioned builder games, something that, you acquired with TinyCo, some expertise there. Where do you see the market heading? Obviously, now AR, Pokemon, everyone is, it's the rage this past week. In terms of the types of games, what's working? What do you think? Where do you want SGN to go?
So I think different things are working for different people. For us, we became a leader in the puzzle game genre. We've tried a few other genres on our own and have done okay, but we're starting to look for gaming genres, expanded gaming genres that we feel are a bit adjacent to the puzzle genre. We want to be leaders in those genres, hence the builder category, that with IP we believe will become increasingly narrative and storytelling driven, which is great being an LA-based company. We have access to a lot of great IP, which we think will be additive to TinyCo. And I think a lot of the upcoming games you'll see a lot more great storytelling. We'll talk about AR and VR too, if you'd like.
Yeah, well, obviously AR, a lot of people are talking about, and Pokemon has become a pop cultural phenomenon, even though, there have been lots of great AR games in the past. There was something magical about that. And just because that's so topical, how much of that is because you think it's the Pokemon IP layered over that game, which, existed before, right. But you talk about, licenses sort of creating discoverability. There's a great example of you attach Pokemon to that game all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's believe it or not, it's a super hot topic for debate. Yeah. Because Ingress has been around for a while and was a really well done game. But I think it kind of works both ways. I think maybe the Pokemon Go wouldn't have done as well if Ingress hadn't existed. So they had a model to work with. They had all of the mapping really nailed and polished, which I think is a big part of that game. And then there was the IP. But to me, I think the whole notion of this being the first sort of breakout AR game that has hit pop culture, which is, not giving it enough credit for what it's really done. It's taking over our streets.
No, I was in New York on the weekend, and it's you go down to Battery City Park, and there, literally hundreds of people all gathering around lures and stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, so with AR, I think everyone sort of expected that it would be some kind of Magic Leap device or something that you wear, or HoloLens, something fantastical that would be more attributable or to console type of games, and something that may happen in 2 or 3 years. But what I think they did is they took a very simple version of AR and said, okay, let's just try it on a mobile device, make it available to everyone in a really simple, fun way, and see what happens, and use the best attributes of AR. And I think it's going to be really interesting if AR sort of takes incremental steps before they get to, the big wearable types of executions. And if it doesn't just hit mobile first like it did with Pokemon Go, I think it's super interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that. You mentioned about being in Hollywood and collaborating with sort of rights holders, and over the years I've seen sort of varying degrees of collaboration, from sort of a straight license deal where it is, it's all about the license fee. It's not really seen as a creative product. It's about as creative as the T-shirt or the Happy Meal that's coming. And then you see other things which are much deeper collaboration. You said like actually involved in the narrative of an IP, ties in directly to a TV show or a movie. It's a side story. It actually has new fiction that is sort of revealed through the game. What's your sort of vantage point on that degree of collaboration? Are you seeing more of that? I mean, you look at, Family Guy, for instance, has done lots of games over the years. Very successful television shows, syndication, other things. Are you finding that, the companies that hold the rights, are they seeing these games increasingly as something they actually want to make part of the canon, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I think so, because the TV shows and movies are obviously not persistent. Yeah. Games are. We all, as mobile game developers, know that one of the keys to being a successful game developer is to always add new content. If you're in Asia, you're adding new content every day or two. In the US, at a minimum, like every week or two, or at least every month. And so it's this sort of living, breathing organism that always gets more and more interesting. There's always new things to do, which is why these games last so long. But from the IP rights holder and creator's perspective, I mean, it's like their baby. And if you're not right on brand with them, you're not going to be doing a deal with them, or they're not going to approve your latest build. So there's massive collaboration. At the very beginning, you have to be on the same page with them. And if you're not, you're essentially not going to get the deal, and they really don't care. Part of your question was around like how much of this is a moneymaker versus like a brand extension to what they're doing, and to keep people engaged with their brand between TV seasons or movies. And I think that's huge. I think originally, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, games that were made about movies were more a focus of just being a marketing vehicle. Yeah, just being a marketing vehicle to let people know, hey, there's this movie coming out. And now it is that, but it's also a key moneymaker for the owner of those properties.
I know, like, the South Park guys are working on a new game, and that's going to tie directly into sort of the new season of the show, and plot lines and everything will sort of continue over. These persistent games, obviously, it's harder to sort of have, new narrative every week and things like that. But do you see a day in this sort of Gamertainment, universe that there is a game where, hey, I watch an episode of a TV show, and then sort of the week in between, I'm kind of experiencing things that happened, and then the next show happens, and the narrative changes, and I'm going back? I mean, is that the type of loop that you think is eventually going to happen?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a little bit of that from us, and there's some of that going on right now. Like, some of you may have heard of Telltale Games, great company, and they're doing a lot of that, where they're following episodes pretty directly, which I think is cool, but it's, again, a little bit limiting once you get out of the season. If you're looking to create a multi-billion-dollar game over many years, it's difficult to do and to stay super on point with the writing and the directing. But I think it's a lot of fun, and I respect the companies that have been able to do that, and I think there's a lot of benefit to it as well.
Now, switching gears, sort of with properties moving the other way, with games becoming entertainment and properties, you have homegrown IPs, obviously, at SGN. You're not just a purely license-based company. This year we've seen things like the Angry Birds film, the Minecraft film is coming down the road, other examples of sort of gaming IP becoming entertainment. And even, some companies we're seeing making their own animated shorts, right? That they're putting on YouTube that sort of extend the IP. How aggressive is SGN? Has it been historically, and how moving forward, how aggressive do you think you'll be in sort of creating entertainment or more linear experiences around your IPs?
Yeah, so I would say in the past, whatever the polar opposite of aggressive is what we've been. I think in the future...
Why is that? The focus? Or?
Yeah, I think it's a big focus issue when you're building your company. You're starting to have a lot of success with your games. You don't want to lose track of what got you there. But by the same token, you're building real brands. We have 50 million unique users playing our games. And when you have that many people playing your games, and many of them for many years, they're diehard fans. They just want more. So you need to start thinking about creating a consumer entertainment brand that'll be around 20 years from now. So when we're creating brands like Cookie Jam and Panda Pop, we don't expect those, I mean, they've been around for 3 years. We don't expect them to go away in 3 years. We expect multiple additional game titles, whether they're sequels or offshoots in other genres. We're expecting potential animated shorts, toys, but it's got to be on brand, in good taste, and it can't take you off focus. And I think you brought up Angry Birds, and I think Rovio's a great example where they created, possibly the biggest brand in the world for a few years, and basically said, okay, we're an entertainment company now, we're not a gaming company. And I don't know, everyone's got different opinions on this, but I think they took their eye off the ball a little bit of doing what they did best, which was creating great games. And they had a successful movie this past year, which is great. But yeah, I think we're always going to be a gaming company first, and then we're going to evaluate those brand extensions in a really thoughtful way, but we're going to do it.
What is the marketplace like for that, though? You want to do that? I mean, are there lots of people that want to make a film? Or, I mean, that's a big investment, right? You're looking at, 9 figures to do that type of stuff, but are there animated shorts? I mean, where does it sort of start for you guys? What are you pursuing right now?
I think the film business it's hard, right?
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of people making a lot of money in that. And Angry Birds was a huge bet. They they invested all the money themselves, as far as I know. I think it was something like $60 million to make that movie. Yeah. And they didn't have any co-financing on it all. They had a distribution partner. And I think that ended up working for them. But even if you look at the amount that they netted from that, it's not that much when you look at the potential of like a mobile game and how much money that makes in a given year and over many years. So yeah, I think there's a lot of other more interesting brand extensions. I think animated shorts are super interesting. Plush toys are interesting. Food is interesting. A lot of interesting categories.
All right. Well, sounds like we'll hear more about that.
By the way, we get approached all the time, and I think you have to be on brand. I think you look at casinos are a great example. You look at like land-based casinos or even social casinos and the slot machines. The most successful ones come from brands. I think Wheel of Fortune is one of the top 3 grossing casino games in land-based casinos.
One sort of riff on the idea of gamertainment is, sometimes there's an IP or a film or, some of these celebrities that are, interested in being in a game, want to be part of something, but there may not be enough time to build some, massive extension. I'm thinking back to, Angry Birds, I remember did sort of a takeover for the animated movie Rio, and there are things where sort of there can be stunts. You could certainly have, a cookie game and, reskin for a property or things like that. Do you think is that something interesting to you, the idea that, you may not be building a standalone app or game, but something where you could have a guest star or a guest IP that sort of appears in a franchise?
Yeah, so we do what we call events, and we do those every couple months where there's something special going on in one of our games. And TinyCo in particular does a great job of that. So they had like a 2-month event around the Civil War movie for their Marvel game. And just worked out phenomenally well. It's almost like launching a new game. And so it brings a lot of interest to the game, a lot of attention to the game, and it's a way of integrating IP that isn't quite so expensive and quite as burdensome for the IP owner. So I would encourage any of you to look at that, look at having more events, and think about including third-party IP in some of your events.
One trend that has happened over the past few years is the sort of celebrity game, the individual brands sort of attaching themselves to a game or property. There have been some examples of, certainly successful games. I think others that haven't really performed. Is that a space that you think is interesting to SGN, the idea of building games around personalities?
So I think we look at celebrities and personalities the exact same way we would a television show or a movie. It has to have a rabid fan base. I think the fan base, especially with celebrities, need to feel like they know that celebrity, they identify with that celebrity, or there's some kind of aspirational quality to that celebrity. So I think we saw early on that the Kim Kardashian game, at least in the US on iOS, did very well, a lot better than anyone expected. It's because she's on TV and on the magazine, and they open up their life to everyone, and everyone just wants more and wanted more. And so that worked. And I think that was the attribute for that game that worked a lot more than just counting Twitter followers, which I felt is kind of what happened with the Katy Perry game, in that, like, obviously she can pack a stadium, and she's a great entertainer. She played the Super Bowl last year, but like, as a game player, do you really feel like you know her, or you know her personality, or you identify with her in any way? I think that's a tough one. I think Gordon Ramsay's a great one because you feel like you know him, you know what to expect. So I think just taking it from face value and counting the number of Twitter followers is not a good way to go, but really digging in a couple steps deeper and looking at psychological reasons of why someone would want to play a celebrity game, what the game is, what the storyline is, who's going to be telling the story, what kind of cooperation you're going to be getting from that celebrity is super important.
Now, say you don't have a big IP, you don't have a celebrity. I'm sure there are lots of developers here who just have great games that they want to get discovered. And you guys have, certainly done that and proven there is a way to get those games discovered. What tips or advice do you have for this audience in terms of getting your game noticed? If it's just your own homegrown IP, I mean, what are some of the secrets to success that you found?
I could give you guys, I would love to hear your secrets of success also, because I think it's something that we always struggle with every day. You don't want to spend, 60% of your revenue on marketing, because eventually your margins become so thin that it just doesn't make sense anymore. So that's why you have to get really smart in terms of A/B testing. Everything you do from, I think spending more time in pre-production is really helpful. Getting focus groups, even if it's 10 people, 10 of your friends that play games, to come in and play different game concepts from a prototype to figure out which theme everyone likes, which type of gameplay everyone likes, which twist on the game everyone likes. I feel like we're all trying to innovate, but when we innovate too much, the users don't understand how to play our games. When we don't innovate enough, games become clones and they don't become interesting, and it's hard to cut through the clutter. So I think threading that needle is really important, and I think doing lots of pre-production, lots of early builds, and getting a lot of input from your friends, family, and even things like usertesting.com are a really valuable tool for us. Lots of research.
Lots of research. So obviously, it seems like at the end of the day, it's got to be a great game, and sort of if it is a great game, then it's got a shot. But if not,
yeah, a great game means a lot of things. It means great art, great animation, great gameplay, differentiation, amazing level balancing, economy balancing, like all the kind of nerdy non-game stuff that's more math and analytics oriented. That's probably 40% of it. And then the rest of it's just like, amazing artists, amazing game design, the stuff that we love to do and think about every day.
Is there anyone out there that...
I would also say that when you're looking at a featuring from Google and Apple, that's something that we always think about. And figuring out from Google and Apple sort of what's important to them at any given time in their life cycle. So if it was a year and a half ago, it might have been, hey, I'm going to create a game that's integrated with the Google Watch. Or for Google, it may be, Apple Watch. For Google, it may be, localizing in certain countries that they're really focused on. So looking at what they're interested in so you can get great featuring on Google and Apple is also important for the developers that don't have the money for a big launch, that can get you sort of noticed by a critical mass of people. And I think localizing is really important too.
And sometimes even when all the stars align, sometimes games don't hit. What have you, when you look at the market now, what worries you about sort of the state of, where the free-to-play market is, what's happening? I mean, is there anything that you would like to try and fix or you're thinking about these days at SGN that you guys want to sort of tweak or wish that things, behave differently?
Yeah, I wish we could experiment with everything and try everything. I wish we could do mid-core games. I wish we could do social casino. I wish we could do storytelling games. And I think with the maturity in this market, you have to think about one thing that you do really well and that you can be an expert in, get really good at that, and then begin to try something new. And, for us, we always want to try something new. We want, we want to do VR, we want to do AR, we want to have a big R&D team, and at the end of the day, managing your resources is probably the most important thing.
Is there anyone you look at out there right now today that you think is doing a great job that you admire in terms of how they're managing their portfolio, how they're extending into entertainment? Any best practices that you admire?
So, yeah, I mean, I think everyone in this room, probably all of you guys admire Supercell. Gosh, I don't think we could learn enough from them or talk about them enough. They have maybe maybe a couple hundred people in their company. They've sold their company twice. They've made money, plenty of money, but they don't seem to be worried about it. They've created hit games. They've created, pretty original games. They've created brands in their own right. They've created games that work globally. Probably the only Western game that actually works throughout Asia very well. So yeah, I admire them a lot. I think EA's done a pretty good job in the IP space. Yeah. You
mentioned, games that work globally. I'm just curious about that from, IPs that you're looking at when you're thinking of, the games you build. How important is it for something to be a global success? How driven are you guys when you're picking IPs or even building your own IPs to think globally?
Well, at least in your portfolio, you have to think about it.
Yeah.
So you got something like Family Guy that's probably not going to do well in Asia because they don't know what Family Guy is for the most part. Then there's, other IP out there like Marvel that is very universal and works great everywhere. So you need to have a good balance that works well in every country, and then you need to think about what game mechanics work in which country. And the U.S. is very similar to Western Europe, and obviously Canada and Australia. And then you can't even say Asia because like China, Japan, and Korea are so different. We've actually done pretty well in Japan. And I think, over the next 12 months, we're going to think even a lot more about localizing even more in Japan to the point where, we may even change out a lot of our art.
We talked about AR. Let's talk a bit about VR, which is something that, certainly feels to me, at least so far, has been a very, core-driven experience with, certainly on the high end, HMDs, mobile. We've seen things, obviously, Cardboard and Gear VR and things like that starting to experiment with that. Apple hasn't got into that space yet, really. But do you think, is VR going to be a big market for the types of games that you guys do and this sort of gamertainment concept? Is that something, mobile VR, you think is going to explode in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the next couple of years. And I think my point of view would be that VR would work better with mid-core games and console games than it would be for pure casual games. But I'm sure there will be great executions on the casual side. I know there's still a couple big problems. Like I still feel the latency in the technology, meaning like whenever I put on any of the headgear or wearables, I still feel nauseous after 10 minutes. I can't do it for more than 10 minutes. And so I think there's still a critical mass of people that just don't feel good putting on that equipment. So it's got to get to a very different form factor. It's got to get to critical mass before a lot of money goes into it. And there just aren't enough great titles out there, and I don't think people are going to invest in those great titles until those problems are solved. So it's a bit of a chicken and the egg thing, but I think it will happen. But it's people said 18 months ago. Yeah. To me, it's probably more like 36 months, 48 months.
So you mentioned sort of the casual game, and we are here at Casual Connect, and I come out of sort of a hardcore, sort of mid-core world of, games. One of the exciting things I think about, a lot of the games that we're talking about here at this conference is that they are, expanding the market, and people that may not even self-associate as gamers are playing them. How do you define the consumers you're talking to every day? I mean, these casual consumers, are they gamers? Are they sort of entertainment fans? I mean, it's, and do you think this audience, are they playing lots of games? Are they going to graduate eventually to mid-core games? I mean, how do you define the type of player that you're appealing to? That's a big question.
That's a big question. So for SGN in the past, it's been more casual gamers. It's been more female skewed. Yeah. We have created games that for people that have been typically underrepresented in the marketplace. We've done that intentionally.
And give me an example of that. Underrepresented, what does that mean?
So like a female demographic for casual puzzle games that has very deep gameplay with thousands and thousands of levels. Something where if you're at your kid's soccer game and you're waiting for the game to start, you can pick up a game and play it for 5 minutes, put it back down, and not lose anything. So you don't have to invest, 45 minutes on your console with 5 people, playing a deep game. So that's what we've been doing on the SGN side. On the TinyCo side, it's been much more male-oriented. So all of their titles have been male-oriented. Some of the new titles coming out will have more of a female skew to them, which we're excited about as well. But yeah, I think the majority of people playing games out there don't self-identify themselves as gamers. And it's pretty interesting because everyone has a certain amount of excess time where they just want to get away from all their problems, get away from all their stresses, get away from traffic, all that, and just pull over, hang out while they're waiting for the bus, whatever, pick up and play and escape the world. And those are the types of games that we've traditionally made.
So when I look at that, I say, hey, there's someone who, doesn't see themselves as a gamer, but is playing games. What is the path forward for a user like that? Do you find that, within network, you can then tell them about another SGN game and they want to download that, or they pick their one game and that's all they play? I mean, what do they graduate to, I guess?
Great question. So, yeah, they can definitely, cross-promotion is really important for us. So that's another reason why it's, I think, smart to be focused, because if you're making 5 different games out there and you can get one user to play 5 games, you're making theoretically 5 times as much profit. But I think what we're seeing and what we're sort of counting on is that casual gaming companies like SGN and others out there are going to increasingly be adopting more mid-core type of tactics or features that will make them a lot more social. So I think people want to play games with their friends. I mean, it goes back to the board game days. It's a social event. It's game night. And to the degree that you can replicate that with mobile games, I think you're going to be more and more successful. It's like Pokemon Go. It's hugely social. And I think things like clans and chat and features like that we've seen in mid-core are all going to be coming to more casual games. So I think that is part of the evolution.
And you see sort of some of your properties can evolve into that, you think, over time?
Sure. I think every social feature that we have out there, like our company is uniquely positioned to understand social a lot and the benefits of social, given the fact that I was at MySpace, my CTO, Aber, who is a co-founder of SGN, was at MySpace for years. We think about social a lot. We think about it a lot outside of just, Facebook Connect and leaderboards and seeing your friends' faces on the map. We think about clans, we think about chat, we think about all of those things. We think about other countries, like we think about Line, we think about Kakao, we think about WeChat. It's not just Facebook. So social's great. It keeps people in the game. It deepens the engagement, and big focus for us.
I think it's a really interesting point is to think about, the social network overlaying a game. And yes, we've seen Facebook Connect, Game Center, Google Play. It's people have done stuff, but it still feels somewhat primitive to me, at least in a lot of the games I've seen, in terms of how you can challenge your friends and what you can do and the level of customization around that. Given your background at MySpace and, that social aspect, it's interesting that sort of, that still hasn't really happened to me in a lot of these casual games. And do you see that do you have a lot of ideas of where that is going to go, or where the white space is in terms of sort of integrating your social graph into the gaming experience?
It's some of the things I mentioned, and I think also in gaming, your social graph on gaming doesn't necessarily need to be people that you know in real life, which is very different than what you would use Facebook for. So I think that's something else that's interesting. You can have an ID or a username playing a game, and you can have a much greater enjoyment playing a lot of these games with strangers, and it works.
Yeah, even Clash Royale, I've got 50 people in the clan. I have no idea who they are, but it's like you're still interacting with them, and you get upset when they kick you out of the clan.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think you see that with fantasy football. I think you see that with like Madden, the Madden mobile game. Lots of great examples.
And this casual audience that you're talking about, the sort of, the female screen audience that do you think the social stuff is going to be more or less appealing to them than the mid-core audience? I mean, do you think those people can graduate to sort of the fun of social, or do they want an isolated experience?
I think it's going to be every bit as important, and I think it's going to be key for us, and not just in our genre, but like if you look at social casino, like, sorry for bringing up, like, look at bingo, for example. People go to the bingo hall. There's a lot of analogs to the offline world. You look at people playing bingo in the bingo hall. They go with their friends, and they want to know what everyone else is doing in the world, in the room, who got a bingo, who didn't get a bingo. And I think it's the same online. So the more that you can kind of study human behavior in the offline world, and also look at previous social networks and different genres of games, and come up with different social experiments, is really smart thing to do. I think that's innovation for us.
Yeah, just a quick question. What about quiz games? I'm from Europe, and I'm just a little bit curious about the popularity of quiz games on television, that I haven't seen any major quiz game make it really big except Trivia Crack. Is there some reason why these quiz platforms that you have on TV haven't broken into any major mobile success? Just curious about what your thoughts is about that. I know NBC is...
Sorry, I didn't quite understand.
I had a tough time hearing it. Yeah. Sorry, I don't think we can quite hear it up here.
Hello? Okay, now I'm connected. The quiz games. I'm wondering about... Quiz games. I'm from Europe. Games. Yeah, I'm from Europe, and I've noticed how incredibly popular quiz games are on TV here. Is there a reason why no quiz IP has really broken through, except maybe Trivia Crack, which is an independent game? But is there...
I totally got your question. So from the beginning of time, quiz game, like going back to early internet, quiz games have been huge. I don't know, there was some game called Quiz Mania or something. I remember 10 years ago that we were thinking about buying because like everyone was playing it. But I think quiz games, at least in the United States, tend to be younger audience. They tend to work for a shorter period of time. They tend to grow virally very quickly, and then they tend to drop very quickly. So I think for us, that's not as interesting because everything that we invest in over a long period of time, for a long period of time, which doesn't make it necessarily the right way to go. I think building different variations of quiz games is brilliant. And the guys at Trivia Crack made a ton of money and still are making decent money. But I think my direct answer to you is that quiz games usually have a short shelf life.
Final.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, over here. Mike from OpenX. My day-to-day world is working with app publishers, and there seems to have been some news over the last few years that people are saying that the number of apps people are downloading is decreasing quite significantly. I think Comscore recently said that the average consumer downloads no apps each month. So how does that affect your business? Firstly, do you see that? And if so, how does that affect your business from a planning point of view?
So, sorry, you're saying that people are downloading fewer apps?
Yeah, so when the smartphone first launched, people were downloading hundreds of apps. Now there's a much smaller subset of apps that people live with on a daily basis.
So first of all, I totally agree with that and what you're saying. Also, in light of like how quickly people are changing devices, and when they're changing devices, they're not always like updating all their apps. It's a good time for spring cleaning to get rid of everything that they haven't played for a while. And I think that's why you're seeing companies that are, instead of building 15 games a year or 15 apps a year and kind of seeing what works, you need to build and release 5 great ones that you know are going to work, or 4 great ones that you know are going to work. So more pre-production, more polish on the app, and more focus on each individual game. Because I think what you're saying is absolutely true. And yeah, that's part of the clutter and discovery problem. And that's how you address it.
Yeah, what lessons do you think Pokemon Go has for the industry? What should we learn from that? Obviously, it's early to tell what the game's going to do in the long run, but clearly Pokemon Go has done some really different and interesting things in its early days. It's had better retention and better early monetization than almost any game. What do you think we should take away from its success or not take away from its?
So, yeah, again, I think there's a lot of different opinions on that question, and it's a great question. And Pokemon Go is sort of the like pop culture breakthrough. We don't see something hitting pop culture zeitgeist very often on the internet or in mobile, in social, in gaming, in anything. And that one has. It's just like we were talking about earlier, you know, he was in Battery Park and there was like a swarm of kids that almost like overran him. And I think what we can take away is that Ingress was fairly similar. And the Pokemon IP is one that stretches over multiple generations globally and did massive. Everyone knows what all the Pokemon IP is. I think they created this social element to that game that made it more fun, but they made it more accessible to the average person. I think the average person wouldn't play Ingress. Even though it was a fun game, but the average person would play Pokemon because it's Pokemon. They understand the notion of capturing a Pokemon versus Ingress. So I think they got the mapping part really right. I'm not sure how much Google helped them with that. I think, yeah, one of the most interesting things was how they began to think about AR versus everyone else. And everyone else was thinking about AR versus like, okay, how do I make this super expensive, complicated game on a HoloLens platform or, you know, a Magic Leap platform or, you know, something else. And they said, like, we don't need to do all that. We can do it much more simply and utilize all the amazing psychology from implementing AR onto a device that everyone has. And so I think that was something they did that was really smart.
Time for...
So sometimes, like, I guess just one takeaway on that is sometimes keeping things more simple is smart. I had also read a blog not too long ago that someone had an interesting point of the original social networking days of MySpace and then Facebook. And then around the same time, you had Second Life that was coming up, which was a social network. But it was all about this sort of virtual reality that you were in, and it was super complicated, and you had to build your own life and your own village. And it was just like, wow, this is way too much work versus something much more simple and accessible. And I think that's another good lesson.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for
thank you guys for
joining us.
coming.
Really appreciate it. Have
Appreciate
a
it.
great Casual Connect. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it, man. That was great. Really appreciate it.